Visitors section, anybody here? Mr. Carr?
Just have a memo to share with the board. All right. I'm sorry. The Moran School Task Force, Clinton Taxpayers Association, has carefully monitored the proceedings of the Moran School Building Committee. The estimated cost of the new school is measuring from $50 million to $65 million, and the reimbursement has plummeted from 46% to 36% to just over 30% with factored in space penalties. This final Gilbane estimate and the original estimates would have been suppressed until obtained by the CTA through FOI requests. The Clinton Taxpayers Association is aware that there are still many critical issues that have not been addressed and questions left unanswered. Among these are, why, when the cost of the building escalated and state reimbursement percentages fell, did the school building committee not reconsider upgrading the existing school at a fraction of the cost? 2, the school building committee claims the town is currently spending $1 million per year on capital expenditures on Morgan. The CTA has been unable to find any evidence to support that claim and challenges the committee to document that claim. Why isn't the building committee taken into consideration the declining high school enrollment and projected continued declining enrollment? Why haven't the following figures been released, which are attached to the graph? What would it cost to update Morgan? What are the options? Why hasn't this been thoroughly investigated? There appears to be no evidence of any detailed proposals or comprehensive bids for this option. What are the costs of maintaining the current building over the next 4 years, the next 10 years? There are many expenses in the first Gilbane estimate that do not appear in the new estimate. For instance, the original Gilbane plan, there was an estimated cost for maintenance, for the maintenance building of $1.3 million. It is not in the current plan. Are there any other surprise expenses that could escalate to $65 million? What about cost overruns? Why does the school building committee propose to pay 85% more than the appraised value of the property and 545% more than the tax assessor's appraised value for the property at 71 Killingworth Turnpike? The offer for the property at 71 Killingworth Turnpike includes $1.7 million to move the seller's equipment. Is there any precedent that the town of Clinton that applies the seller's moving expense? Has Clinton ever done this before? Please give us specific examples. The $1.7 million moving expense will not be reimbursed by the state. The home at 69 Clinton Turnpike was built in 1800. What are the intentions with regard to preservation of this historic home? With so many unanswered questions, it's hard to imagine the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance could make a decision of this magnitude without a public hearing in which the public is permitted to ask questions and make comments before a decision is rendered by these two boards. The town meeting that will follow is out of sequence to have any bearing on the deliberations and decisions. So far, the boards have heard from a handful of the electorate. This is a process that ignores and disrespects the concerns, questions, opinions of the broader Clinton taxpayers who must foot the bill for this proposed project. The Clinton Taxpayers Association urges the Board of Selectmen to give the public an opportunity to ask questions and to voice concerns about this decision before you make it. Failure to do so is an insult to our democratic principles. We request this matter be tabled until a public hearing is held. In order to give the taxpayers full disclosure on this proposed project, the CTA will hold an informational meeting on Wednesday, March 21st at 7 p.m. in the Rose Room this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Well noted, some of the facts are clearly way off. And, so I'm not surprised because that would be equivalent of Gingrich endorsing Obama for president. So appreciate your comments. Good. Moving on. Now we're on to the school. There's a resolution before us from bond council. read it. He wants to hear me read. Basically, the paragraph 1 is Town of Clinton Board of Selectmen bond resolution appropriation and bond authorization, $64,750,000 for the new Moran School. Resolved that the sum of $64,750,000 be appropriated for the cost of A, planning, design, construction of a new high school in the town of Clinton, approximately 135,000 square feet, including but not limited to building construction, site development, paving, purchase and installation of certain furnishings and equipment, creation of athletics fields, and installation of information technology, all alterations, repairs, improvements in connection with purchase and acquisition of real property. Currently, the site of Clinton Nurseries and certain adjacent properties consisting of 36.6 acres, more or less, located at 71 Clinton Turnpike, and being more particularly described as Clinton Assessor's Map ID 414581, that's second block now, including all surveys, alterations, repairs, testing, and other fees, and temporary and permanent financing costs related thereto the project, and to meet said appropriation and in lieu of a tax, therefore bonds of the town be issued pursuant to Chapter 109 of Connecticut State General Statutes as amended the town charter or any other provisions of law thereto, enabling the amount of $64,750,000 or so much thereof as may be necessary after deducting grants or other sources of funding available. Therefore, that the First Selectman, the majority of the Board of Selectmen, Treasurer be authorized to issue and sell temporary notes of the town not to exceed $64,750,000 in anticipation receipt of the proceeds from the sale of such bonds to determine the amount, date of maturity, interest rate from, and other details of such notes and bonds pursuant to Chapter 109 Connecticut General Statutes as amended, the charter or any other such provision of law thereto enabling, provided that the proceeds of the sale of such notes shall be used for the purpose, and which goes back into the Connecticut General Statutes and building of a high school. Okay? So this is an approval of the resolution. Board of Finance has to do a resolution, and if they approve it Monday night, we approve it tonight, they approve it Monday night, it goes to a town meeting, and I want to be clear regarding the town meeting. I know there's been questions regarding why there's not a vote at a town meeting. Town meeting vote is based on an appropriation of funds that does not exceed 2% of the tax levy of the town. Anything that exceeds 2% of the tax levy of the town has to actually go to referendum to be approved. So this town meeting, specifically, just like the budget referendum, adjourns to a referendum, period, end of story. That's by statute, and that's by our charter. That's why there's not a vote at a town meeting to approve this to go to referendum. It automatically goes to referendum because it's more than 2% of the tax levy. Okay? Very clear, very specific.
Why isn't there a public hearing?
There's no requirements for public hearings for referendum.
But in an issue of this magnitude, a public hearing would be in the best interest.
There was a public presentation last week. The building committee is having a public presentation on the 15th.
15th, the 25th, and April 3rd.
They're gonna have three of them proceeding prior to the town meeting, and then the town meeting will be two before the town meeting. The town meeting will be an opportunity again for public to ask questions, get answers, even though it's not a vote, it's to adjourn to referendum.
All right, okay, as long as there's a question and answer.
There's gonna be plenty of opportunities coming up forward.
Also, I'll make the motion that we approve the appropriation and bond authorization and send to the Board of Finance in the amount of $64,750,000 for the new Moran School.
I have a second.
Second the motion, discussion.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah. I have a few things I'd like to say. I appreciate the CTA's input here, and they have many of the same questions that I have, that I just need more answers before we can move on with a project of this size. I think that overall, we're being given a choice that's yes or no, and that is not what we were promised at the outset of this. We were told that there would be discussions of other facets of dealing with the situation that Old Morgan presents. And we haven't had that. The public has not had that opportunity to hear other options. The other night at the joint meeting, one of the first things that Willie said was the idea of renovating is off the table, there will be no discussion of that. Well, I mean, that may be an agreement that the Morgan Building Committee came to, but I don't think that's an agreement that the public holds true to. The public wants to know what all the facts are before they make a decision. I have a question. I don't feel as though the Morgan Building Committee performed due diligence by not providing alternative options for remediation of the issues at Old Morgan. We did not get a cost analysis of renovations to the old building other than to cite and eliminate the renovate as new option. There was never any discussion of renovation, any legitimate discussion for the public consumption of renovating particular areas of the schools that are, the school that is in dire need of renovating, or perhaps repurposing areas of the school that, in order to use some of the excess space that we hear about continually. I feel that the Morgan Building Committee has further questions to answer associated with the costs of this project. I've heard stated at the joint meeting last week, and I've seen it in the minutes, that we have been told the costs of maintenance and repairs to the current Morgan are $1 million a year. I find no verification of that statement. I have the budget papers here from last year stating that the repairs to Morgan were far fewer than that. And I know that the CEC budget for the entire Board of Education has, I don't know if it's ever even gotten to $400,000 a year. So that premise of $1 million a year on repairs at Morgan needs authentication. We were also, the public was presented the idea that a new Morgan was the reasonable option since a roof on the old Morgan, and we have heard this repeatedly, the roof on the old Morgan was going to be anywhere from $2 to $4 million. And yet when I brought this up at the joint meeting last week, my question was immediately poo-pooed, and I was told that the roof is being maintained and repaired, and that the Board of Education has been patching the roof at a cost of $7,000 to $8,000 a year, and that a new roof wasn't necessary on the old Morgan. So that pretty much obliviates the primary argument, the primary reason for the Morgan Building Committee, because seeing as how they started out as a roof committee and moved on to a new Morgan, I mean, we need to figure out exactly what the situation regarding a $2 to $4 million roof is. I've never seen an estimate. I've never seen an estimate from someone who is a roofer stating exactly what the costs would be. Either that is the premise or not. If we do need a roof, why aren't these costs cited anywhere in the Board of Education budget? And also, I'd like to say, shame on the Board of Education for letting Morgan get to this condition. It is the charge of the Board of Education to take care and maintain the schools in proper form. If those showers, if that gym, if the roof is in terrible condition, well, whose fault is that? It's the Board of Education who has let these repairs go for years and years and years. To spend $64 million to remediate 10, 15, 20 years of neglect is penny wise and pound foolish. When I hear the problems associated with Morgan, I wonder how the Board of Education let it get into this terrible state. And also in this package, $64 million, I see no mention of bonding costs. Those bonding costs can easily be $1 million. There's no reference to them in these costs anywhere, and that is a piece of information that the taxpayers need to know. They're in there.
900.
Yeah, it was in here, it was in the original literature, but it wasn't in what we got last week.
It's still there.
All right, you can show that to me then, and I will apologize and say I'm wrong. All right, the maintenance building, the one we have now is currently in Morgan. It's there, it's part of the building, and no matter what happens, if that building is no longer Morgan, that maintenance building has to be addressed, and the costs associated with that are associated with the building, the new. I mean, whether it goes to another facility or not, those are costs that are associated with changing more from the old Morgan to the new Morgan. I have not heard any discussion. I know that there's a figure in there for site work. but one of the very first Morgan building meetings, the engineer was talking about the fact that there could be ledge and a lot of rock removal in there, and we all know what happens when you run into those situations. I mean, you can drive up to Joel's school and see what happened when they ran into ledge there. Instead of a nice level driveway, we've got a mound like this because there wasn't enough money to get rid of the ledge, and we need to know, we need to have more specific figures.
That's why they've been doing borings.
Yeah, we need to know exactly what's.
That's why they did test borings, and that's why the site number came to where it is.
Well,
They've determined whether it's rock.
that could add millions of dollars onto the cost of the project. I also have not heard any consistent response to whether the sale of the old Morgan will impact the amount that we get returned to us by the state eventually. Originally I heard that, yes, they would deduct the amount that the old Morgan was sold for from the from the grant proceeds. And then I heard recently that no, they won't if there's a particular timeline involved or something, but that's something that I would like to know. And my final question is, I'm really curious to know why this timeline is being pushed so fast and furiously. I know that when I attended the Morgan Building Committee meeting in January, they hadn't met for a while, and there was a lot of discussion about all the work that needed to get done in order to bring this to referendum, and at that point, they were talking August and September. And now we're seeing that there's an extremely tight timeline that brings this to April 11th. And my gut instinct is that the committee is trying to get this voted on and approved before the summer residents come. And we all know that those summer residents pay the lion's share of, not the lion's share, but they pay proportionately of a very significant amount of tax dollars in this town. And I think to have this vote taken before they are here to represent themselves and to have their voices be heard is a disservice, and I think that's only going to make the town look bad. I think it's gonna look like we're trying to slide something in under the mat, and I honestly would like to see this referendum happen in the summer months when there is more participation on the part of all of Clinton's taxpayers.
All right, unfortunately, that's not true as far as the timing. It's always been discussed it was gonna happen this fiscal year because it has to get to the state by June 30th in order to be acted on by the state,
Well,
because it takes
let's
them
have
a
it
year.
in June then. Let's have it in June. Let's have it after
The
Memorial
intent
Day.
actually was a long time ago to have it in February, and then there was some stumbling blocks, and this was, you know, a lot of the stuff you're saying, I understand what you're saying. Unfortunately, I've been to all the meetings, and I was at the presentation a year ago when the renovators knew and all the alternatives were presented and told why they didn't work. It's not like it wasn't discussed. Yes, they were, Mr. Carr, you're shaking your head.
The facts and figures were never
Yes,
addressed.
they were.
The ideas,
And unfortunately, for anybody that's questioning all of this stuff, is the fact of the matter is that the Board of Selectmen then approved them to go along with the design of a new high school, conceptual design, and the Board of Finance subsequently approved that, and then ultimately went to a town meeting which approved a new high school. Now, if this goes to referendum, which it should, and the townspeople say no, then you're back to where we are now. Do we fix the roofs? And yes, the roofs need to be fixed. It's 20 years the state allows for reimbursement. The problem is, and I wouldn't blame the Board of Ed, the problem is the town years ago did not spend, I've been dealing with this for the last 6 years, almost 7 years now, the town did not spend money on maintaining their facilities. And we've been playing catch up, okay? Prior administrations felt that maintaining buildings wasn't as important, or infrastructure, as some of the other things that got done in town. Well, here we are. Okay, it's not the Board of Ed's fault. I will not say, I don't know if the Board of Ed ever brought it up, but there is a roof plan in place. That has been in place for the last 8 years, 6-8 years now, and it's been followed. These roofs are due to be replaced last year, 2011, and their 20-year life cycle is when the state will actually reimburse you for replacement of roofs. Now that cost escalates just like any other cost, so they're not $3 million, they're probably closer to $4 million now. And that was estimated by our roof architect, Al Jakunski, who has done most of the roof projects for the town of Clinton, whether it be public municipal buildings or Board of Ed buildings.
So what happens if
If
the school passes in referendum, the new
we
ordinance?
keep patching the roof until the new school's built. Bottom line, end of story. Why would you invest millions of dollars in a building that now, and again, and you say there was no money in capital, well, there has been some money, but the majority of the roof work that's been done at Morgan in the last 4 years at least has been bonded. The auditorium renovations interior and the roof renovation of the auditorium was bonded. The window walls were bonded. The boiler replacements were bonded. You don't see those in the capital budget or the operating budget of the town. Those are bonded projects.
It's not $1
And those are in
million
excess,
a year.
and those are excess of $4 million. When you add them all together.
My argument is.
I
that
agree that it's
we were
not $1 million
cited-
a year.
We were
It's probably,
given a statement that said it was $1 million.
and that's why when I
That's
talk
not
about
true.
money and potential revenues and things of that nature, I'm on the conservative side and the low side. I don't wanna fill the pot with cream and then have the cream be gone, okay? But bottom line of the story, it's cost us a lot of money to operate that building, and if this fails,
It's not, you know, Willie, at the beginning of this project, we were told last year it was gonna be $50 million and we were gonna get, I forget, 45% back. Now we're down to 36% and it's $65 million.
because the state changed
You
the
know what?
rules.
I have the demographics here. The population of this town is 13,000 people. You're sitting here wanting to pass a bonding package of $65 million tonight. We've got a budget of $40 million in front of us, 13,000 people, and $100 million is on the table. $100 million.
The $40 million is an annual thing.
And it's 13,000 people. I mean, it's just, the debt load it just makes me extremely apprehensive.
And the debt load, if you added the $46 million, if all the $46 million that they're estimating, in which I anticipate a higher level of reimbursement, but they're taking a worst case scenario at 36% with the space penalty. But if you anticipated having to pay the full $46 million in a bond issue, that would put our debt service right now at about $65 million, which is still $170 million below what we're allowed to borrow.
You know, Willie, I've got a.
So the
I'd
question
like
is
to
not
take
that- is
a
the-
$500,000 out of my house. Would I do that?
The question is, here's a question, there's just two questions here. Can the town afford it? Yes. Are the people willing to pay for it? That's to be decided. We can afford it. Are the people willing to pay for it? That's the question.
John, you've been on the committee now for a while. Are you comfortable with moving forward in this issue, bringing it to the public?
I think it's a huge number. I'm not overly comfortable with the number per se, but I think it's the right idea. I think for economic development, I think we need to do it. If not anything, I think in the long run, I think we'll all be happy if we get it. Do I want to spend that kind of money? Not really. You know, I'm up in, but do I? I think, in my opinion, and I've done a lot of research outside of the Morgan building with, because being in the field, and I gave it out to, you know, people that I know and trust that do this all the time, and they all think it's conservative numbers. So they don't, there's no way they think we get hurt on the numbers that are there. And then I went beyond that and looked into commercial realtors and stuff for the old Morgan. You know, I wanted to see, and then I went down to see Mel and stuff, to see what the tax revenues and stuff for across the street. Because, you know, you hear all these numbers go back and forth. And I wanted to, because I knew I was going to be voting on this. And I'm still not sure how I voted yet. But I think if you look at it, and like the numbers Willie gave last week, in my opinion, are very conservative. Like he just said about the cream and stuff. They're very conservative, what the town could get in. And that's just today. We're not talking in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. You know, the bonds, whatever. It's going to be over 20 years. You know, when I first went into it, I was definitely much more skeptical. There's still a lot of things that, you know, that I don't particularly like or whatever, but I do think we're safe with the number that Gilbane gave us. I don't think they underestimated it. You know, obviously, when the farther we get along with design and stuff like that, the contingencies are going to go down. You know, right now you have really high contingency because we don't know what exactly. I think we're very, we're very conservative on the septic. We have I stole everything.
Yeah, you did.
Came on prepared. We have, right now, we have in for sewage treatment plant thing. I truly believe that we'll be able to do a conventional septic system. That will be a savings of $1 million on our estimate now. And I just think for the town, strictly on the economic part of it, I think to get things jump-started, I mean, like one little business downtown is not gonna do it. You know, to get things going, the grant list and stuff, we really need to, and I think that's a place to start. It's probably the most valuable commercial piece right now in Clinton, and that's why I think we should do it. I mean, even if we spend, whatever, say we spend half the money on renovation, all right? We're still not getting any money back. You know, the school's still in the same place. We're never, even if we spend half of it, you gotta, that's how I've been looking at it. If we could come close to the same price and still start getting that revenue, I think it's, you can't see how it isn't worth it, you know? I am concerned, you know, I'm not saying that's gonna make our kids better students or anything like that, which concerns me. You know, I think that has to be addressed in a different, you know, that has nothing to do with the mortars and bricks, but, you know, I just think for the town, in my personal opinion, I think it's the best thing.
So, Willie, what are the present bonding rates?
Well, you're at 2.5% now, but with working with the finance director, and Jack met with us today with the Board of Finance chairman, and I've been meeting with Kevin for months about this, you know, you're not gonna anticipate 2.5%, you're gonna anticipate 4 or 5%, because you don't know what it's gonna be in 2 or 3 years. Bernanke keeps talking, and we gotta raise interest rates, so, yeah, good luck, maybe we'll get in there, and if it passes and you get bonds at 2.5%, 3%, good for us. But the estimate right now is about 4%. And based on a 4%, and I've been saying, it's about a 1.8 mil increase in your taxes on an annual basis, which the average house in town is assessed, and I keep saying assessed, not appraised, the average house with residential property is $200,000. Unfortunately, Stan Fisher said it was $360 a month. It's $360 a year increase in your annual taxes on a $200,000 assessed value, or $30 a month. So those are the numbers. I mean, and that's what ultimately I believe the people should be allowed to decide on. Do you want to pay for this or do you not? And if they say no, okay.
And if it does
Then we put lipstick on the pig back at Moran. We put a roof on it and we fix it up.
If it does go through, what's the timeline looking? Is it a year before it
Well,
goes
it'll
to
probably
the
be,
state?
what, January 2013, probably before we would even break ground. No, January 2014, probably before you even break ground.
So this is
Because it takes the state a year to, remember, the state, it's basically a state legislative session, so it's gotta get to the state by June 30th. Their session doesn't begin again until January of 2013. They have a 5-month session to act on these different things, go to bond commission has to ultimately approve it after, and then the town would be, okay, go ahead. And then that's when the determination will be made, this is what you're gonna get back.
At that point.
At that point, the state would say, that's why it's an approximate 19 million, could be more, could be less. I would say more than likely, the potential is that it would be more than less than the 19 million. But we don't wanna say that, we're saying, the committee is saying,
Worst case.
this is it, we're staying low, conservative. I call conservative low. When Gilbane was presented the numbers, they were calling conservative the high side. They wanted to make sure that there was enough money there to do everything that needed to be done.
No.
And John, you feel comfortable about sitting on the committee and going through all the figures and everything's in the bit?
I did until about
No.
10 minutes ago.
Oh, you did? Did you
Jerry.
find somebody?
Any idea why the financing got taken out?
Yeah, I don't think the cost of the bonding is in the.
I think they talked to Kevin, and Kevin told them to take it out.
Yeah.
They worked with the finance director, and that was the recommendation that was
Kevin
made.
and Pavlik from Gilbane
Yeah.
said they don't include that in the cost of the.
And yet it is a cost. You know
I agree.
you know what this reminds me of, and no offense, PD, you know? Anyway, the communication center, we passed a bond for what, $3 million? And I don't know about you, but I thought when I voted for that, that was the cost of the communication center. And then come to find out, there are huge ancillary costs in the communication towers that are involved and a few other things associated with that. I don't wanna find out after we're paying this debt load that there are all these other costs that were not included in the original figure that we were given. And I still don't have an answer. I had asked, we had been told originally that selling Morgan, the figure, whatever you gain from selling Morgan would be deducted from the reimbursable amount that the state gives you.
No.
And then I heard that, no, that it is not included, so how does
No,
it stand today?
this is how it works. Basically, if it passes, the school moves up the road, the Board of Ed then turns the property over to the town. The town can market that property and do whatever it wants with the proceeds of the property. It has no impact on the reimbursement.
Doesn't,
No.
is there a
Not at all.
timeline involved in
No,
that?
no.
I mean, you have
Could
to
happen
hold
the
it for a
next
certain
day.
number of years?
Could happen the next day. And then I wanna, part of it is the sale of the property, yes. You can use that as part of your revenue projections, but here's what has to happen. Say it sells, round number, 5 million. That's basically what we have for an appraisal now, is 5 million. And again, low side conservative, could go more, be happy to get that. Great. And that includes the building. That's not us demolishing the building. That money goes to the general fund of the town. Now, at the end of the project, then typically there's a make-up bond issue done at the end of the project to balance the books. That money, you can go to a special town meeting, take that $5 million revenue, and have it appropriated through Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and through a town meeting, towards that capital line item, which is the project line item. And that will reduce the amount of money you have to borrow at the end of the project.
Wait a minute, why would you be borrowing money at the end of the project?
The make-up bond, you always borrow at the end you don't borrow in anticipation that you're gonna spend all of this money. You borrow, you borrow the net. You're gonna borrow what your reimbursement ends up and what your total cost. You borrow the gross, you're paying interest on money you didn't need, potentially. So at the end, there's a makeup. And that's where that extra money, the additional money from the sale of the property can be used through appropriation, because it all goes to the general fund, municipal finance, from the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Finance, to a special town meeting to say, okay, we got 5 million, we want to appropriate it to that capital line item, which was the school, which reduces the last amount of money we had to borrow, which would then reduce the amount of debt service. Okay, anybody else? Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
None? Abstentions? 1, okay. Motion passes. Good.